The first snow fell early that year. It came silently, drifting over the high desert and into the arroyos like ash from a dying fire. The mountains wore white like a burial shroud, and the wind carried the scent of something ending. In the Calderon Ranch, that meant trouble. Cold this early was never good. It turned calves to corpses, cracked leather saddles, and froze wells before they'd run dry. Elena Calderon didn't mind the snow. She minded what followed it: desperate men, hungry wolves, and the long silences in her father's house. She had been raised between two bloodlines: her father, Don Rafael, a proud Spanish landowner, and her mother, Nita, a mescalero healer with the eyes of a hawk and the patience of stone. Elena spoke Spanish like a priest's daughter, Apache like a whisper in the trees, and English only when necessary. Belonging nowhere made her both invisible and unforgettable. Her father called her Niña Salvaje, wild girl. Said it with a scowl. Said it with love, too, once, before her mother passed and his eyes turned inward. It was on the 5th day of snow when Elena found the Apache warrior. She had been gathering willow bark by the ravine, following the path her mother once took to treat fevers. Something caught her eye, a smear of red on white, blood, not from a deer, from something heavier. She followed it down into the rocks and found him. He was lying face down beneath a thicket of juniper, half covered in snow, breathing in short, broken bursts. His chest was bare, striped with blood and blackened bruises. His left arm hung limp, twisted wrong. 3 bullet wounds marked his body, one in the side, one near the collarbone, and another low in the thigh. Whoever shot him had aimed to kill, but he hadn't died. Elena stood over him, torn between instinct and fear. She knew the stories. Everyone did. Rangers whispered his name like a curse. Taklishim, they said. Black smoke. An Apache raider with a body count high enough to earn silver and land for anyone who brought him in, dead or dying. But what Elena saw wasn't a demon or a savage. He was a man. Pride clung to him even in unconsciousness. A feather was braided into his long black hair, and talismans hung from his neck: bone, obsidian, and rawhide. His skin was burning with fever, but his hands were clenched. Ready to fight even as death hovered near. She should have walked away. Instead, she tore her shawl, bound the worst of his wounds, and dragged him inch by inch up the ravine, through the snow, over frozen roots, until her back screamed and her fingers were bloodied raw. She didn't take him into the house. Too risky. Her father would shoot first and pray after. Instead, she brought him to the old root cellar behind the barn, a half-sunken stone chamber filled with dust, dried corn and broken tools. There, she laid him on a straw mat and kept the fire low. For 5 days, Elena fed him broth laced with herbs. She cooled his skin with willow tea, sewed his wounds with shaking hands. She slept beside the door with her rifle cradled like a child, never knowing if he'd wake grateful or vengeful. On the 3rd night, he opened his eyes. "You'll bring death on yourself," he rasped, his voice like stone scraping against stone. "I already carry it," she whispered. They spoke little. He never told her his name, but in silence they understood each other. Pain had carved both their lives, and neither asked for more than survival. By the time he could stand, the snow had melted, and the land had turned to mud. He looked at her once before leaving. A long, heavy glance like the stillness before a storm, and then he was gone. No words. No promises, just the wind and the slow drip of thawing snow from the cellar roof. Elena stood at the doorway, arms folded against the cold, heart heavy with questions she dared not ask. She never expected to see him again. But fate, like snow, often falls when you least want it to. 3 winters passed. The snow no longer fell early. In fact, it hardly came at all. The land dried beneath the weight of bad promises and worse men. The Calderon Ranch, once a proud stretch of mesquite and cattle trails, now sagged like a dying lung. Fences fell. Roofs leaked. The bones of the land showed through. Elena worked harder than ever to keep it from collapse. She hauled water by hand, patched saddles with her mother's old needles, and whispered to the earth in Apache the way Nita had done, hoping the old spirits were still listening. They weren't. Her father drank most days. By nightfall, he was either asleep or yelling at the ghosts that haunted his memory. Sometimes Elena couldn't tell if he was calling out to her mother or cursing her. Word spread quickly through dry mouths and cracked lips. Raids, fires, blood. An Apache warband was active again. Small settlements burned to the ground. Miners killed, horses taken. Some said it was revenge. Others said it was madness. But all agreed on one thing, the man behind it. Taklishim, black smoke. His name was said with the same reverence as thunder, feared, distant, powerful. Elena listened in silence, saying nothing, because she had once held that thunder in her arms, fevered and broken. She'd once wiped blood from his face. She'd once lied to protect him. It was a dry, brittle dusk when the riders came, 6 of them, dust-choked and sun-leathered, wearing long coats and cold eyes. They came not with questions, but with accusations, men who walked like they'd been given permission to do harm. They called themselves rangers, but their badges were rusted and their mouths were filth. Elena stood on the porch, her shotgun balanced across her arms. Her father stumbled out behind her, clutching a flask. "Evening, miss," the leader said. He had a silver tooth and a scar across his chin. "We're looking for a ghost." "No ghosts here," she said evenly. "You sure about that?" He held up a wanted poster. The drawing was rough, but unmistakable. The same jawline, the same braids, the same war paint slashed across the cheek. A reward was scrawled beneath it. $500 dead. No questions asked. "Elena?" Her father asked softly, glancing at the paper. "Is that—" She didn't answer. One of the men spit in the dirt. Another grinned. "Word is the ghost was seen near here not long ago." "Couple years, maybe?" "You nursed him, didn't you?" "I save what doesn't want to die," she said. "Then you're just as guilty." They pushed past her before she could stop them. Her father tried to intervene and was shoved to the ground. Elena raised her shotgun. The standoff lasted seconds. No bullets fired, but the message was loud. They didn't want justice. They wanted a reason. They left nothing of the barn but cinders. Took the last 2 horses. Punched her father hard enough to leave blood on the porch. Carved their message into the door with a Bowie knife. Whore of the Apache. That night, Elena knelt in the ashes. The wind bit at her skin, but she didn't move. She let it cut her. Let it carry the scent of smoke and shame into the hills. She didn't cry. There was no time for it. She was about to rise when she felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, a presence. Slowly she turned. A black horse stood at the edge of the trees. Beside it, a man. Shirtless despite the cold. His chest painted in white lines. A feather braided into his long dark hair. A blade strapped to his hip. His eyes caught the firelight. They didn't burn. They absorbed it. Elena rose to her feet. "You came back," she said, voice barely audible. "I heard fire in the wind," he replied. She stepped toward him, breath catching in her throat. "You should not be here. They'll kill you." He looked past her at the scorched barn. "At the shattered window. At the door. They already tried to kill you." She hesitated. "I never asked you to return." He stepped forward, closing the space between them. "And I never said I would stay away." For a moment, neither moved. Then he reached out, gently touching the cut on her cheek. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. "I came," he said quietly, "for what was never promised." The stars were sharp that night, cut into the black sky like obsidian. No moon, no clouds, just the hush of cold wind brushing through the pines, and the distant crackle of a dying fire behind the Calderon house. Elena sat on the stone well, her father asleep inside with a bottle clutched to his chest and bruises still blooming along his jaw. The barn was gone, the horses too, the last of her mother's garden trampled under boot and ash. Taklishim knelt by the fire pit. He had said little since returning, no apology, no explanations, just that line she couldn't forget. "I came for what was never promised." She watched him from across the yard, unsure if she felt anger, relief, or fear. "You kill them?" she asked, voice flat. He didn't look up. "Not yet. They'll come back, I know." Elena crossed her arms. "If you stay, they'll burn the rest. Kill my father. Hang you from the oak. He finally looked at her, his eyes calm and unreadable. They will try. She shook her head, tired of riddles, tired of fire. You didn't come back for vengeance. You had years to burn this place down. I didn't come for fire, he said, rising to his feet. I came because the land remembers who stands on it. He stepped closer, slow and steady, until they stood barely apart. She could see the thin scar near his collarbone where she'd stitched him. Could feel the warmth rolling off his skin, painted and bare in the cold. You said once I'd bring death on myself, she murmured. You have. He reached up and touched her face again, like he had the night before. Only this time it wasn't a gesture of concern. It was something older, familiar, like a memory being recalled. You buried your mother by the peach tree, he said. Her breath caught. How do you know that? I watched you. From the ridge, a year after I left. You wore black. Your hands shook when you covered the grave. Elena stepped back. Why didn't you come then? He was silent for a long time. Because I was still a hunted man, and you were not yet ready to lose what little peace you had left. His words struck like a cold wind. I lost it anyway, she said, almost a whisper. They stood in silence. Somewhere, a coyote howled. Not close, but close enough to remind her the night was watching. Finally, she broke the quiet. So what now, Apache? You gonna drag me into your war? Paint my face? Ride off into the hills like the old stories? His mouth barely curved into something like a smile, but there was sadness behind it. There is no war, he said. Just survival. And me? You are a voice I never forgot. She turned from him, suddenly angry. At him, at the world, at herself. I didn't save you so you'd come back and haunt me. I didn't return to haunt you. She faced him again, eyes sharp. Then why? Why now? Taklishim reached into a small leather pouch at his waist and pulled out something folded in cloth. Carefully he unwrapped it. It was the silver crucifix that had once belonged to her mother, the one she thought had been lost after the burial. Her mother's rosary beads still clung to it, faintly worn by time. Elena blinked, her throat suddenly tight. Where did you... Your mother gave it to me, she stared. The night before she died. She came to the ridge. She knew I was watching. Said if the time ever came and you were no longer safe, I would return, not to repay debt, but because I had been chosen. Tears welled, sudden and hot, catching her off guard. I don't believe in fate, she whispered. I don't believe in promises, he answered. But still, here we are. He handed her the crucifix. She took it with trembling fingers, holding it like a memory too fragile to speak aloud. They stood there, in the smoke-stained yard of a dying ranch. Two people who had never asked to be bound, and yet were, by blood, fire. And something older than either of them could name, above them. The wind carried the scent of coming snow, and far in the hills, a war neither of them wanted, waited to begin again. The wind changed that morning. It came from the north, cold and sharp, carrying the weight of something old, something coming. Elena felt it before the sun even crested the ridge. A shift in the air, like the world had paused its breath. Taklishim was already gone from the yard. He rose before light, moving like a shadow, speaking to no one. She found him by the ruins of the barn, crouched in the ash, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Tracks, he said when she approached. Yours? She asked. He looked up. There's 3 riders, maybe 4. Not rangers, bounty men, greedy, sloppy. Her stomach knotted. You're sure they're coming here? They're already close. She stared past the fence line, into the line of crooked mesquite trees where silence hung too heavy. How long do we have? A few hours, maybe. Elena crossed her arms, suddenly cold despite the sun. You could run. If you go east through the canyons, you might lose them. He stood slowly, wiping his hand on his leg. I didn't come to run, he said. I came to end it. She studied his face. No fear, no doubt. Just the same stillness he'd had when she first found him. Only now, it burned beneath the surface. I'm tired of burying things, she whispered. People, land, names. So stop burying, he said. Start protecting. They fortified the ranch with what little they had, moved her father inside, nailed shut the windows, poured lamp oil along the fence line. Taklishim painted lines across his chest, his arms, his face. White war paint, stark against his skin. Elena didn't ask what the symbols meant. She already knew they weren't for enemies. They were for the dead. The sun was high when the riders came, 4 of them, fast, loud, confident, armed to the teeth and dressed like men who believed no bullet could reach them. The same men who had come before, who had burned her barn, who had called her names and laughed while her father bled. Elena stood behind the broken gate, shotgun in hand, a match in her pocket. Taklishim stood beside her, silent. The lead man smirked. "Still hiding your savage girl?" Elena didn't answer. "Or maybe you're the one wearing war paint now," another chuckled. The leader raised his rifle. "We'll take him first. Then you." That's when Taklishim moved. It was fast, too fast. A blur of black and bone, fire and steel. His blade met the man's throat before the rifle could rise. Gunshots followed, loud and wild. Elena ducked behind the well, firing once, hit a rider in the shoulder. Another tried to flank, but the ground beneath him lit up in flame as the oil caught fire. Screams tore through the yard. Gunpowder, smoke, blood. By the end of it, 3 men were dead. One crawled into the brush, leaving a trail of red. Elena sat on the ground, breathing hard, the shotgun hot in her hands. Her ears rang. Her heart thundered. Taklishim stood over the last body, chest heaving. His war paint smeared with blood and sweat. "It's over," she said. Unsure if it was true. "For now," he answered. That night, they didn't speak for a long time. They sat by the rebuilt fire pit, her father asleep inside, the stars overhead sharp and bright. The land was quiet, wounded, but not dead. Elena held her mother's crucifix in her hand, running her thumb along the edge. "You came back for something," she said. "But I never gave it to you." Taklishim looked at her. "I didn't come to take." She turned to him. "Then what?" He hesitated. For the first time, he looked unsure, as if he too had spent years running from something nameless. "I came," he said slowly, "because when I was dying, you didn't ask who I was. You just saved me. You were a man," she said. "Not a monster." "They don't see it that way." "I do." He nodded once. Then without words, he reached into his pouch and pulled out a single feather, long, black, tipped in white. He placed it gently in her hand. "This is not a promise," he said. "It's a memory. You can keep it or let it go, but it's yours." She closed her fingers around it, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone.